Fly back there and tell them the real Dragon Warrior is coming home.
We all love a good hero, right? But a hero is only as good as the villain they're up against. And in the world of animation, nobody does villains like DreamWorks. You know the feeling. You're halfway through a DreamWorks movie and suddenly realize, I think I like the bad guy more than the hero.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Maybe it's the smooth talk, maybe it's the killer backstory, or maybe it's just the fact that they're relatable. Sometimes painfully so. We grew up watching Disney villains burst into musical songs about how evil they are. And that's fun too, but DreamWorks? They stepped up the game. Take Hal from Megamind, aka Titan. The OG nice guy gone wild. Or how about Ramses from The Prince of Egypt, who wasn't even trying to be evil? He was just stuck in a toxic legacy, literally drowning in the expectations of his dead dad. Lord Shen isn't just a flashy bird with fireworks, he's Poe's dark mirror. And Tai Lung isn't just a big, scary snow leopard. He's what happens when someone's whole self-worth is tied to one idea. If I'm not the Dragon Warrior, I'm nothing. DreamWorks doesn't just write villains, they craft icons. Is it the writing, the animation, the voice acting? Well, let's figure out what actually makes their villain great and dive into the DreamWorks Hall of Fame to break down one unforgettable bad guy at a time. First things first, so what separates a great villain from a forgettable one? It's not just about being scary. A villain needs to matter. They should challenge the hero in a way that goes beyond just fists and explosions. They've got to get under their skin, and ours too. And DreamWorks? They cracked that code a long time ago. A good villain has to have layers. They're not just evil because the script says so, they've got reasons, motivations, trauma, or goals. And DreamWorks also gets the visual side of villains just right. Think of Lord Shen's dramatic tail feathers swirling in the moonlight, or Eris literally floating through reality like she owns it, because she kind of does. They're not just written well, they're designed to make you watch them. And then there's the dialogue. The script isn't afraid to let the villain steal the scene. So what makes a villain great? Depth, style, and presence. And DreamWorks doesn't just check those boxes, they color them in, draw sparkles around them, and add a killer soundtrack. Let's look at some of DreamWorks' finest in action. So get ready for the Hall of Fame that'll make you want to join the dark side. We start strong with Tai Lung because this guy was the first real sign that DreamWorks wasn't playing around. Tai Lung's villainy is the textbook of how to make your audience feel bad for the bad guy, if you ask me. He's not evil because he wants world domination. He's more a victim of expectation. Raised by Master Shifu to be the Dragon Warrior, he put in all the work, trained harder than anyone, and got told he wasn't worthy. Just imagine training your whole life for something and then being denied at the finish line by the same person who hyped you up to believe it was yours. What makes Tai Lung actually tragic isn't just the rejection. It's that he was never told he was loved for who he was. Only what he could achieve. That hits, man. And it's a perfect contrast to Poe, who was never told he was special, but found greatness because of love and self-belief. That scroll scene? Poe sees nothing and says it's blank because he's a blank slate. Tai Lung sees nothing and says it's nothing because that's how he sees himself. That level of nuance? That's not Saturday morning cartoon villainy. That's therapy-worthy. Drago Bloodvist from How to Train Your Dragon 2. Drago is what you get when fear becomes religion. This man doesn't want peace. He wants control. And he's willing to kill, enslave, and destroy anything that stands in his way. He sees dragons not as creatures but as tools, weapons, pawns. His introduction alone is pure menace. Storm clouds, burned villages, and that creepy hook hand pointing like the Grim Reaper. You feel the threat. Drago didn't just break Hiccup's heart, he made Toothless do it for him. That one scene, watching Toothless, Hiccup's literal soulmate, get turned against him by force? That's next level. Drago doesn't want to fight you, he wants to make you fight yourself. Unlike many DreamWorks villains, Drago isn't stylish or clever, has brute force. He's a tank with a god complex. But what makes him effective is that he's believable. There are people like him. People who see compassion as weakness, and in that sense, he's one of the scariest villains the studio's ever created. Fairy Godmother from Shrek 2. We all love a good corporate overlord, and Fairy Godmother is the blueprint. She doesn't just grant wishes, she grants terms and conditions. This woman turned magic into a business model and happily manipulated an entire kingdom for the sake of her brand. And the best part? She wasn't subtle about it. She sang Holding Out for a Hero like she was headlining Coachella while casually trying to ruin Shrek's marriage and rewrite Fiona's fate. That's commitment, man. She was so cunty and evil that I couldn't help it but stan. She wasn't evil because she was jealous or had a grudge, but she was evil because she genuinely thought she was doing the right thing. For freaking profit. Plus, her death? One of the most satisfying animated scenes ever. Nothing like watching a magical tyrant explode into glitter while Bonnie Tyler plays in the background, if you ask me. Lord Shen from Kung Fu Panda 2. Now this is how you do a tragic, terrifying, and visually iconic villain. Shen is elegance wrapped in trauma. A literal peacock who committed genocide because he was afraid of a prophecy. Let that sink in. And that prophecy wasn't even specific. It just said he'd be defeated by a warrior of black and white. So this man, in full-on anxiety mode, decided to wipe out every panda in China. Just to maybe change his fate, Shen's obsession with escaping destiny is his destiny. In trying to kill the one who'd end him, he created his enemy. That's Shakespearean-level storytelling. Plus, the way he moves, fluid, deadly, dramatic. He's like a ballerina with a body count. Even the comedy in the movie makes him scarier. That rooftop monologue moment where Po shouts something heroic, and Shen's like, "What?" from across the street? Iconic, right? Terrifying and hilarious. But before we continue, I want to ask you guys for some help. I'm trying to reach 700 subs, and you can really help me with that. So if you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks, guys. Death from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Death isn't just a villain, he's a presence. From the first time he shows up, whistling with those glowing red eyes. Oh, I immediately knew he wasn't like the others, man. He's not here to monologue or conquer. He's here for one reason. Puss in Boots owes him 8 lives, and Death wants the 9th. He's not evil, not cruel. He's just tired of being cheated on. If I were the Grim Reaper and some damn cat was dodging me with cartoon logic, I'd be pissed too. What makes him brilliant is that he's not out of place in a fairy tale. He is the fairy tale. Every sword fight with him feels like a heartbeat skipping. Every word is deliberate, and the fact that he genuinely respects Puss when he finally shows fear, that's storytelling. And let's not forget, Death isn't a villain you beat. He's a villain you outgrow. Puss has to confront his own mortality to earn his life back. That's not a plot twist. That's existential growth. Pitch Black from Rise of the Guardians. Pitch isn't trying to take over the world. He wants to make it stop believing. His weapon isn't fire or fists, it's fear. He literally turns dreams into nightmares and wants to erase joy from childhood itself. But here's the twist. Pitch is lonely. He's the boogeyman, but he's also the guy nobody believes in anymore. And that hurts. He's actually not evil. He's just forgotten. And that's what broke him. There's something deeply human about that. Don't get me wrong, I don't root for Pitch, but I kinda understand him. He's the fear of irrelevance, the need to matter, even if it means becoming a monster. And when Jack Frost finally defeats him, not with violence, but with light, it feels like Pitch's biggest fear comes true, that he never mattered at all. Big Jack Horner from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. He is evilness himself with zero apologies. Jack Horner didn't have trauma, no lost love, no complicated childhood. He's just bad, like unapologetically, cartoonishly, deliciously evil. That made him refreshing. In a world full of misunderstood villains, Jack shows up and says, "Nope, I just want to win. And I don't care how many people get hurt." It was so nice to get a villain who isn't asking to be understood, he just wants to be feared. He literally enslaves mythical creatures, abuses his magical arsenal like a toddler with a cheat code, and keeps a Jiminy Cricket-style conscience bug around just to argue with. The best part? He never listens, at all. His whole personality screams rich kid with power issues, and that's exactly what he is. But it works, because the movie knows it's ridiculous, and it leans all the way in. Jack Horner is every selfish CEO, every kid who never heard no, and every comment section troll, all rolled into one magical maniac. And when he dies, it's not some big, tragic fall. Nope. He just goes out with a splat. Iconic. Eris from Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas. Eris is what happens when chaos decides to look hot, float around like ink in water, and whisper threats like they're compliments. She's not just a goddess of discord, she is discord, and she enjoys it. You know a villain's good when people are still thirst posting about her 20 years later. For me, Eris didn't just steal the movie. She was the movie itself. She doesn't need an army or a giant weapon. She uses illusions, manipulation, and raw confidence to toy with mortals. And let's not forget that silky voice. Michelle Pfeiffer brought a level of seductive menace that most animated films wouldn't dare try. Eris doesn't get a redemption arc or a deep sob story, and she doesn't need one. She's here to cause problems on purpose. But she's not lazy or sloppy about it, she's artful. Even when she loses, she doesn't seem bothered. She's like, well, I'll be back. That's a real threat. Titan from Megamind, Hal is terrifying because he's real, like uncomfortably real. Before he became a flying laser-shooting maniac, he was just a lonely guy who thought being nice meant he deserved love. And when he didn't get it, he snapped. He's the kind of guy who complains that girls only like jerks while secretly being worse than any jerk you've ever met. Megamind predicted nice guy syndrome before the internet even had a name for it. That's not an exaggeration. Hal's villainy isn't built on world domination, it's built on entitlement. The world didn't owe him anything, but he thought it did. And when he got superpowers, he stopped pretending to be nice. He became what he always was on the inside, manipulative, aggressive, and terrifying. He's also a brilliant contrast to Megamind. While Megamind discovers he doesn't actually want to be evil, he just wanted to matter, Hal proves that being powerless doesn't mean being good. Hal had every chance to choose the right path. He just didn't want it. And that makes him one of DreamWorks' most human villains. Grimmel the Grizzly from How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World. Grimmel isn't just another dragon killer, he's a calculated, manipulative psychopath who hunts night furies for sport. He doesn't rant or roar, he monologues like a Bond villain and smiles while setting traps. Where Drago was brute force, Grimmel is all strategy. He knows Hiccup's weaknesses, his compassion, his hesitation, and he exploits them. There's a moment where he tells Hiccup that peace was never an option, and you realize this guy isn't driven by loss or vengeance. He enjoys the hunt. Grimmel is Hiccup's mirror, but one that cracked a long time ago. He's what Hiccup could have become if he believed dragons weren't worth saving. He's calm, cultured, and deadly. He uses poison darts instead of brute strength, and he tames his own dragons not through friendship but fear. That contrast alone is haunting, and makes his final fall feel like a quiet, inevitable collapse rather than a big boss battle. Ramses from The Prince of Egypt. Ramses is DreamWorks' most emotionally rich villain in my opinion. He's not evil, he's tragic. A man raised to be a god suddenly facing a brother who challenges everything he's ever believed. And the worst part, you can see the pain in his eyes as he turns into the villain he never wanted to be. He didn't want to be the villain, he just couldn't afford not to be. He tries more than once to reconnect with Moses, but the pressure to live up to his father's legacy crushes him. Like really crushes him. That scene where he echoes his father's words,
"There shall be a great cry in all of Egypt, such as never has been or ever will be again,"
chills me to the bone. It's not just about pride, it's about a man trying to convince himself he has to be cruel. And that complexity? You rarely see that in animated villains, especially in kids' movies. Mrs. Tweety from Chicken Run. Okay, she may not shoot fireballs or command armies, but Mrs. Tweety is terrifying in a way that hits different. She's every overworked boss who's one payroll mistake away from turning into a dictator. Except here, she literally wants to turn chickens into meat pies. She's like Dolores Umbridge mixed with Gordon Ramsay. And I'm not okay with that. She's cold, calculated, and somehow scarier because she's real. No magic, no monsters, just pure greed. Watching her chase down Ginger with that cleaver like she's in a horror movie? Nightmare fuel. And when she finally falls into the pie machine, that's justice, baby. Alright, before we move on, I gotta give a shout out to a few villains who didn't get full sections, but still absolutely deserve their flowers. These might not be the most popular villains of DreamWorks, but they each brought something special and unforgettable to the table in my opinion. Galaxar from Monsters vs. Aliens. He's a total spoof of every sci-fi alien overlord, and somehow still manages to feel like a legit threat. Between his army of clones, his plan to wipe out Earth, and his casually hilarious delivery, Galaxar is chaotic evil with a smooth voice. Kai from Kung Fu Panda 3. Okay, look. He's not everyone's favorite, but the concept of Kai is awesome if you think about it. He's a former warrior turned spirit stealer who literally yanks the life force, aka Chai, out of his enemies and turns them into jade zombies. That's metal. Plus, his beef with Oogway adds some depth we don't talk about enough. General Mandible from Ants. Straight up ant fascism, man. This guy tried to destroy his own colony for the sake of a perfect society. He's got that cold, calculated dictator vibe. To be honest with you guys, Mandible reminds me of my old boss, and that's not positive.
Slapper can also stroke.
Going in the wind as an empty of the truth that is naked.
So, all of these characters aren't just great because they're evil. They're memorable because DreamWorks makes them feel real. Even when they're talking wolves, fire gods, or entitled man-babies, they challenge the hero, but they also challenge us. So how do DreamWorks villains stack up against Disney's, for example? The short answer? DreamWorks doesn't just compete, they dominate if you ask me. Not because Disney villains are bad, they're iconic in their own right, but because DreamWorks is just playing a different game. Don't get me wrong, Disney gave us some absolute legends. Scar, Ursula, Frollo. Scar literally dropped his brother off a cliff while quoting Shakespeare. Frollo is still one of the most disturbing and realistic villains Disney ever created. And Ursula, she basically invented the concept of a villain slay. But most classic Disney villains are pure evil. They want power, revenge, or chaos. They don't change. And lately, Disney's been on a redemption arc kick. Suddenly, every villain is misunderstood or traumatized. We're getting origin stories that try to explain why Cruella de Vil wanted to wear puppies. And while that can work, it also starts to feel repetitive. Making villains misunderstood and redeemable isn't bad, but doing it non-stop is. DreamWorks flips the script. Their villains come in all shades: tragic, twisted, terrifying, and sometimes all three. They don't shy away from letting villains be evil and complicated. You can understand Tai Lung's pain without excusing his actions, and you can feel bad for Pitch's loneliness and still root for his defeat. Death, for example, isn't a broken soul needing healing, he's the Grim Reaper, and he wants his respect. Jack Horner isn't a product of his environment, he's just awful. And that's actually refreshing. DreamWorks isn't scared to say, yeah, this guy's messed up, but he's also got a point. And it shows. DreamWorks trusts the audience, especially kids, to handle complexity. They believe viewers can understand that a villain doesn't need to be redeemed to be meaningful. Sometimes evil is just evil, and that's okay, right? Sometimes trauma doesn't make you good. It just makes you dangerous. Disney often builds a movie around the hero and then plugs in a villain. DreamWorks, they build both. And often the villain is the one who shapes the hero's journey the most. Would Po become the Dragon Warrior without Tai Lung? Would Puss confront his own mortality without death? Would Moses have found his purpose without Ramses? I doubt it. Some villains are fun in the moment, but a week later, you forget their name. Not DreamWorks villains, these characters stay in your head, rent-free, years after you've seen the movie. And there's a reason for that. Every great DreamWorks villain connects directly to the core theme of the movie. They're not just obstacles, they're mirrors. Shen isn't just Poe's enemy, he's what Poe could become if he never found peace. Ramses doesn't hate Moses. He's clinging to a world Moses walked away from. Titan isn't just a bad guy, he's a warning about what Megamind could have been. What I also really love is that the villains aren't just there to fight the hero, they represent the hero's worst fear. That hits. Because it means the showdown isn't just about fists and fireballs, it's about identity, growth, acceptance. The villain forces the hero to change or fall. The villains are often layered with tragedy, but the movies never excuse them. Tai Lung is sympathetic, but the movie still shows him as dangerous. Pitch is lonely, but his plan is still evil. And that's what sets DreamWorks apart. Disney sometimes makes you feel like the villain just needs a hug. DreamWorks makes you feel like they need therapy and a prison sentence. DreamWorks is like, trauma can explain your behavior, but it doesn't excuse what you did. And that level of storytelling, that's how you write for everyone, not just kids. And the real magic? DreamWorks villains aren't just flashy, they're essential. Without them, the hero wouldn't grow. It's not just about good versus evil, it's about the internal journey. Poe doesn't become the Dragon Warrior until he confronts Tai Lung, and everything he fears about not being enough. Hiccup doesn't become a leader until Drago forces him to see the cost of mercy. Puss doesn't find peace until death literally makes him face himself. And actually, they're just too cool if you ask me. They're voiced by legends, animated like bosses, and they often have the best lines in the movie. They're fun to watch, even when they're terrifying. That's why we remember them. That's why I remember them. That's why we still talk about them. That's why, even years later, people are still commenting on how Shen's feathers moved like fire, or how Eris made chaos look good. So what does all this mean? DreamWorks villains hit different. They're bold, broken, clever, unhinged, relatable, and terrifying, sometimes all at once. But what really sets them apart is the craftsmanship. DreamWorks doesn't just throw a villain into the mix, they build them with purpose. Every villain feels like they belong to their movie's world. You can't swap them out. Shen could never work in Megamind's universe. Jack Horner doesn't belong in Kung Fu Panda. And that's because DreamWorks tailors each villain to the story, the theme, and even the visual style. From the chaotic flow of Eris to the haunting stillness of death, these characters are sculpted to stand out, but never feel out of place. This isn't just good writing, it's world building. It's the difference between a cool character and a necessary one. And finally, these villains have something to say. Whether it's about trauma, ego, fear, or identity, they reflect real stuff. They aren't just characters, they're commentary. Jack Horner mocks selfishness disguised as ambition. Tai Lung shows how praise without love breaks people. Drago represents leadership through fear and how dangerous that can become. DreamWorks villains are what happens when animation studios take us seriously.